Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Scrub again with me. I'm so glad you could join me out here. We have a gorgeous morning. So, good morning to you. Buenos dias. I'm glad we're here together. Use that chat and tell us, where are you coming from? What town are you from? Do we have any Florida people here today? Do we have any people from other states or even other countries joining us out here at Archbold Biological Station today? I would love to know. And hey, Central Virginia! Woo! Oh, the Riley family is back again. Good to see you. I love when people use the chat. And as we're going around out here, if you see something that stands out to you, feel free to ask a question about it. Maybe I can even find time to go over and look at that plant or animal track or whatever it is. So we'll have about 35 minutes out here. We're going to talk about what is the scrub. We're talking about oaks and oak galls. We're talking about earth stars. We're talking about Archbold's weather station. And I've got a surprise plant at the end that I found this morning that's a carnivorous plant. We're going to check that one out too. If you think you know what plant it could be, write it in the chat. We have a special guest during the question and answer at the end. Kevin Main is our land manager, and he is the one responsible for Archbold's weather station. So you can ask him all your questions at the end. He also does he's in charge of our fire program, the prescribed fire program too. So you can ask him questions about that. Well, here we are in the scrub. And when I take groups out here, the first thing I like to do is bring them out to a nice scrubby spot and say, how do you know you're in the scrub? And it might seem like a silly question or a simple question because, they know they're in the scrub. They drove out to a scrub preserve. But how do you know you're in the Florida scrub? Well, it's pretty simple. There's 3 questions you can ask yourself. And if the answer is yes to each of them, then you're there. Number 1, are you in Florida? That might seem obvious, but sometimes that's not always the case. An animal or a plant might be named for a certain place, but you can still find them in, many other places. The Florida scrub is special because it's just in Florida. Number 2, do you see any white sand around? Are you standing on white sand? Because if you're standing on a darker soil or even a reddish sand, that's not the scrub. Let's take a look at my feet down here. Are we in white sand? You betcha. Here we go. Look at this white sand. It looks like we're on the beach. That's number 2. Question number 2, are you in the scrub? Does it feel like you're on a nice white sandy beach? And it does feel like a beach because this used to be a beach. If you could get back in your time machine a million years ago when the ocean was higher than it is today, most of Florida was underwater. But you have these big old sand dunes that got built up in the middle of the state. And that's what they were. They were sand dune islands. So the scrub is a very ancient habitat. It's been here for at least 1 million years, probably a lot longer than that. That's number 2. Question number 3, are there any oak trees around? Now, I want you to picture in your head, what is an oak tree? What does an oak tree look like to you? And when you're seeing this habitat behind me, you might be thinking, that does not look like an oak forest to me. I see some pine trees back there, and I see a lot of bushes. Where are the oak trees? Well, there are oak trees. In fact, I am surrounded by oak trees. These are all oak trees. I'm surrounded by oak trees here. They look like bushes because in the scrub, generally the scrub is has pretty low vegetation, and it's real open. You can see for pretty far. There's no canopy above your head like you might think of a forest as having a shady canopy. And the reason for that is fire. Florida is the lightning strike capital of North America. So for a long, long time, maybe millions of years, definitely thousands and thousands of years, there's been fire caused by lightning strikes. And we can see that by looking at what species, what plant species have been here for that time. We can see it in sediments of ash collected at the bottom of lakes. It's all kinds of evidence for this. And people have been lighting fires for a long time too. Native Americans, ranchers, and these days, for the last maybe 50 years, scientists have been lighting fires too. Today, we light prescribed fires, and that's a team of people, trained professionals, going out, lighting one area of scrub or other Florida habitat at a time. And the reason for that is if you wait for a wildfire to hit, then it can burn down houses and can be dangerous. The other reason is that today there's so many roads and ditches. Humans have changed the landscape a lot in Florida. So all the habitat is cut up into little pieces. The fire can't travel like it used to. So what happens is you get overgrown scrub. Then when a fire starts, then it's bad news, because it's going to be a much bigger, hotter, more out of control fire than one that starts when the vegetation is nice and low like this. What I'd like to do first here is look at these oak trees. And we've got 4 different kinds of scrub oaks. So you're going to get a quick lesson in how to tell them apart, because we actually have all 4 right within just a few feet of me here, which is nice. I was able to find a spot with all 4. So we'll start with about this one right behind me. This one's called Chapman's oak, and I'll get you up close here, and I'll even pull off a leaf. Chapman's oak looks like a wavy potato chip. that's how I do it. Looks like a wavy potato chip. Look at the shape of this leaf. You're gonna see the other ones in a minute, and you see how different they look. So this one, it's kind of waxy. All 4 of these are pretty waxy, and that's to help protect them from the sun, so they're not evaporating and drying up out here. I see right down real low. Oh, I have to be careful because there's also cactus. There's a cactus. There's 3 cactuses right here too. This one is a myrtle oak, and I'll pull one of these leaves up too, so you can see this one does not have the wavy potato chip look, but it's still around the same size. The leaves are around the same size, and it's still pretty waxy. Now, I just mentioned leaf size, but maybe I shouldn't have, because leaf size can change a lot from plant to plant. You could have the same species of plant, like one of these oaks here, in different parts of this property, and some of them will have leaves this big. Other ones will have leaves that are just a lot smaller than that. And even on the same plant, you can find big leaves and small leaves. So you can't just go by that. So we've got 2. Let's see. Oh, hey, right here. This one's my favorite. Right here, this is sand live oak. And I like this one because it's the first plant that I learned how to identify when I moved to Florida 8 years ago. So sand live oak, not just waxy, but this one is it's much harder. It feels more like leather. Oops, let me get a good one for you. Feels more like leather, and it's curled a little bit. This one too, I've seen some of these with big leaves. This is a smaller or maybe medium-sized leaf. But sometimes you'll find these with leaves 2x, 3 times as big as this. They curl a little bit. We're gonna take a closer look at this in a minute, but I want to show you the other one. And I think of them a little bit like they look like little upside down like canoes or something. I'm going to actually get the macro lens and show you this one a little closer, but I want to show you the 4th scrub oak out here is this one, and this one is so cool. Because look at this. Look at these leaves. They're all curled up, much more curled than the one I just showed you, and pointing straight up at the noon sun. They're pretty cool. This is an oak that you only find in Florida. So I do like that about them. It looks like someone has a blow dryer or something under them blowing up toward the sky. And they're waxy again. Remember, that's to keep them from evaporating all their moisture out. Well, being curled up helps protect them from water loss, and pointing up at the sun helps too, because when the sun is at its peak straight up there, they've changed their angle towards the sun and get a little, get a little bit off from if they were getting just the full blazing like that. Yes, they're always curled. They don't curl and uncurl. Always curled up like this. Now, sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between these and the Myrtle Oaks, because the Myrtle Oak leaves, they look a lot like this. They're just not as curled. So even I out here sometimes, I'm like, I can't tell the difference. But this one is really easy. In fact, I'm going to put this even further away. Check this out. There's a whole bunch of these all around me right here, all sticking straight up like that. And if I looked, it would appear that there are maybe 10 separate oak trees next to me. But here's the cool thing about all 4 of these oak species. They do grow from acorns, but they grow sexually with acorns. One acorn makes a tree, but they also grow asexually. They're clonal. That means that underground, they are spreading out and then popping up as new trees. All of these around me right here, this could all be one tree. Could all be one tree. And here's the even cooler part about that. How old is this? How old is it? Because we burned out here, I think it was 7 years ago. And you can see a lot of these are still pretty low. When we burned out here, it would have looked like all these were dead. But if you came out just 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, you would have seen at the base of these oaks, not just this one, but all 4 of these species, at the bases of them, oaks popping back up again. Not from new acorns. It's the same plant just rising back up from the roots. So if you try to count the tree rings in an oak tree in the scrub, it will tell you how old it's been, it's how much it's grown since the last fire. How much that stalk or that part of the tree is, that trunk, but it's not going to tell you how many fires it's lived through. Is it 100 years old? Is it 1,000 years old? 5,000 years old? 10,000? We don't know. That's one of those mysteries of the scrub that I think is really interesting. I promised that we would take a closer look at the sand live oak. And I want to show you this one closer up because underneath the bottom of the leaf, there's little hairs. And this plant can get confused with the big old live oaks that you see all over Florida. If this isn't burned, it can become a big tall tree like a live oak. But there's one very easy to distinguish difference here. So I've got one right here, and I'm going to switch my lens around, and we're going to put the microscopic lens on, and take a look here. I can get the sun on there. There we go. Here's the bottom of this. Oh, there it is. There it is. Here's the bottom of this. And what you might be able to tell is there's little hairs. It's fuzzy. It has a fuzzy underleaf. I was talking to you about how all these oaks have adaptations to protect them from water loss. Well, plants, they breathe from the underparts of their leaves. They have little holes in the underparts of the leaf called stomata. And when air blows against there, a little bit of water will evaporate. So all the little tiny hairs on this one, those are acting as windbreaks. there's a whole bunch of little windbreaks there to help minimize the amount of water that gets lost from the evaporation from the air. Sometimes on the oaks, actually a lot of times on the oaks, we will also see strange growths on them. They look, there's all different kinds. They look kind of like a potato is growing on them. And gosh, I thought I just saw one here a minute ago. I've lost it, but that's okay because I have, oh, it might be because I brought some in my pocket. But let's see. Okay, I lost it on there, but this is why I come prepared. Check this out. In my pocket here, got one. Check this. See, they look like little potatoes are growing. This is from, I don't know which species. This is from one of the 4 oaks out here. Oh, I realized I forgot to tell you the name of the one that sticks up. It's the reason I forgot is because people call it different things. The scientific name is Quercus inapina, but some people call it just scrub oak or Archbold oak. Okay, so back to this. Take a look at that. What could these be? If you know what this is, type it in the chat. And you can find all different kinds of different shapes of these. Hey, yeah, somebody got it. It's an oak gall. I'll actually show you this with the other camera in a second. Insect gall. Yep. All right, I'm going to switch my camera around and I'll tell you what this is. Here we go. So what is an oak gall? This is a nursery for little baby wasps. There are lots of species of wasps out in the wild, and not all of them sting. So these ones, the gall wasps, they are very small, generally smaller than 1/4 of an inch. They do not sting people. And the mama gall wasp, she goes up to the oak tree and lays her eggs just under the surface. Could be on the bark, could be on the leaf, even a flower. And after the egg hatches, the larva produces a chemical that induces the oak to grow this kind of like a scab, to grow this thing. Now the plant is trying to protect itself, but this ends up being the perfect nursery because this protects the growing wasp. I'm going to switch my lens back again. So this protects the growing wasp. And the plant actually puts a whole lot of tannins in here, bitter chemicals to protect it from other insects coming in. So it ends up being good protection for the baby wasp in there. Those little holes that we saw, those are probably from the wasp. The wasp would have been a larva in there, then gone through its whole complete metamorphosis, become an adult, and then chewed its way out and flown away. But I don't know if all the holes are from that, because other times other insects will drill into here, and some of them will put their eggs, deposit their eggs inside of here, or they might be going in there to eat the larva. So, I don't think we have this in Florida, but I even read about an oak gall that the chemicals somehow are able to make the gall produce nectar or something like that attracts ants, and then the ants patrol the gall and protect it from other insects. Amazing. There's lots of different species of wasps. At Archbold, we have 2 researchers that have worked on this. Dr. Warren Abrahamson and Jim Cronin are currently working on wasps, and they have counted about 80 different species of oak gall wasps here at Archbold. And every one makes a little bit of a different gall. So I just think those are fascinating, and we get a lot of questions about those. The really funky ones is you can have galls made by funguses too, and those are the ones that look real funky. I brought some another little piece of show and tell out here for you, and let me show you here. I'll dump this out. Does anybody know what this is? What could this thing be in my hand here? It's not going to bite me. It's not a plant. It's a type of fungus. It's called, yeah, it's a type of mushroom. It's called an earth star. I saw somebody did guess that. So this is an earth star, and you can probably tell why it's called that because it looks kind of like a star and it's on the ground. But I want to show you something cool about these, and I got a little experiment here. Check out this one. This looks almost more like a tumbleweed or something. It's all closed up, but I did bring some water with me. So I'm going to pour, so I've got the closed up one in there. Going to pour the water in. And we'll give it a couple of minutes so we talk about mushrooms. Here, I'll put this, here's another one too that's about halfway closed up. And boop, put that one in there too. And we're just gonna leave them in there for a little bit. And then in a couple minutes, we'll take a look at them. So let's talk about fungus and mushrooms. When people normally think about, if I say fungus, generally they're thinking of like a mushroom you would buy at the store, you know, and eat. But there's all different kinds of fungi, and the mold. If you leave bread out and grow some mold, that's a fungus. If to make the bread you have yeast in there, that's a fungus too. And when we're looking at these earth stars here, that is the fruiting part of the fungus, just like the mushroom that you buy at the store. Oh wow, this happened pretty fast. I'm gonna set this down and pour this out. So remember, we had 2 of them in here. Get that, I get the other one out too. Oh yeah. Look at this. Remember how closed up this was? One was half closed, the other one was all the way closed. Look at that. What was that? A minute and a half, maybe? And it opened right up. That's amazing. So why would water do this? Well, let's go back for a second to what these things are. When you see a mushroom that looks like a mushroom or one of these, it's the fruiting body. Most of the fungus is actually underground. It's all these little white filaments underground. But when it wants to reproduce, sometimes they can reproduce by breaking apart too. But when it wants to reproduce with its spores, it grows a mushroom and then it sends the spores out. The reason this one waits for water is because it's amazing. It first it starts all closed up, and then when it starts raining, it opens up and it can actually lift it up so it can get up a little bit above, maybe nice and high. And when the raindrops hit it, it has this little sac in the middle filled with spores. When the raindrops hit that, it puffs s'mores at s'mores. It puffs spores out into the air. And if we had found a fresh one, this has been in the learning center for a year or something. If you do get lucky enough to find a real fresh one, you can flick it with your finger, and it will poof all this brown. It looks like brown smoke, and little spores going out, little baby fungus going out into the world. And these are just pretty darn cool. All right, I'm glad that worked out so well. Well, I've been talking about, I was talking about some of the plants, and I've been talking about rain, and what about the weather? Archbolds, people know us more for studying, gopher tortoises and Florida scrub jays, or for our work at Buck Island Ranch. But we've also been doing interesting work recording the weather for a long time. So I've got a video, I think it's about 6 minutes I recorded this week, talking about our weather station and how it all works. So check this out.
If Archbold Biological Station was a superhero, its power would be long-term data sets. I'm talking about natural history observations that span decades. For example, right behind me is Archbold's weather station. At this spot since 1931, every day we've been recording the weather. Now, I have to admit, I've always found this site a little bit mysterious and haven't really understood what all these different instruments and structures were about. So I asked our land manager, Kevin Main, to come out and show me how it all works.
Weather data is collected every morning. I come over at 8 a.m. and I grab my pencil and my data sheet and I fill in the temperatures, the high and low temperature, the current temperature, the soil temperatures. I measure the rainfall if there was any rain, and the barometric pressure.
This first structure here is where they check soil temperature. They record the temperature of the soil at 1 inch, 2 inches, and 6 inches underground. Then they're off to check the temperature and the barometric pressure. They have to make sure to reset the temperature gauge in here so that they can see the low and the high over the next 24 hours. This strange looking structure right here is for collecting rainwater. And the metal pieces that come around it are a wind guard protecting the centerpiece here. This instrument I really did not understand. It turns out it's for weighing water. And it's not something that gets checked every day. So I asked Kevin about it and he opened it up for me. I could see it was filled with water with this strange film on the top of the water. I thought maybe something was wrong. He explained that, no, it's actually oil they put in there to keep the water from evaporating. These days, we also have electronic equipment that updates us every 15 minutes with weather data. But still, we record by hand every day and send that information to the National Weather Service, which we've been doing since 1969. After showing me around, Kevin told me about what it's like to check the weather here at Archbold.
One memorable event was coming out here one morning and opening the door to the shelter. And between the door and the frame, a scorpion was hiding out. And I didn't notice it. I put my elbow down to start recording the data, and it stung the tar out of my elbow.
I've been talking about weather, but what is weather and how is it different than climate? Weather is the day-to-day condition of the atmosphere. Like, is it cloudy out? Is it raining? What's the temperature? And climate is the long-term pattern of weather in an area. For example, in the desert, you can still have a rainy day. That's the weather that day. But the climate of a desert is that it's dry, even if it sometimes has rainy days. What's the climate in Florida? It's a subtropical, humid climate. Subtropical means that we're near the equator, but not that close. So it's warm or hot a lot of the time, but it gets cold as well. And humid means there's a lot of moisture in the air. Those things together mean that if you're here at Archbold Biological Station working outdoors, there's a good chance you'll be sweating. How much rain do we receive at Archbold? Well, check this out. Here's the average annual rainfall here, 135 centimeters. That's about 53 inches per year. This is the average. Every year is different. If we go up here, we can see in the year 1953, we had a lot of rain that year. We had over 6 feet and 4 inches. If we go down, our lowest annual rainfall since the early 1930s was in the year 2000. We had 2 feet, 3 inches of rain in the year 2000. There's a lot of variation here. 55 inches of rain a year, that's pretty good. If this was a desert, you'd have hardly any rain. If there was a jungle, you could have twice as much or more than that. But as you can see, there's a lot of variation. The other thing
about the rainfall at Archbold is most of that comes during only half of the year. The rainy season is mid-May through mid-October. Most of that rain falls. And then the other half of the year can be a drought sometimes. Imagine if you were a plant or an animal surviving out here, and half the time there's lots of rain and even floods or hurricanes. And then the other half of the year, it's a drought. At Archbold, our researchers study ecology. That means not just the living things, but the non-living things like weather and soil, and how they all interact together. So for example, knowing about the weather from year to year, and knowing about the times that certain flowers bloom every year, if we look at it together, we can see how the weather affects that. Or we can look at data on gopher tortoises and Florida scrub jays and see how they are changing and reacting and adapting to weather as it changes throughout the seasons, and maybe even over long periods of time. I hope that popped all these questions about weather and research into your heads while you were watching that video, because remember, we'll have Kevin Main will be on in just a few minutes, and make sure you're writing those questions in, put them in the comments. If you're with us on Zoom, then you can put it right in the Q&A area. But if it's on Facebook, we do have someone watching Facebook and copying questions over to Zoom. We've got just a few minutes left before we get to the question and answer part. And I couldn't help but I wanted to show you something here. I'm not in the scrub anymore. I've just, took a couple 2-minute walk. So this is right next to the scrub. When I came out here earlier today to scope things out earlier this morning, on the trail here, I came across a carnivorous plant, and I thought, it's too good to pass it up. So even though this is a plant that you see in the wetter areas, I want to show you. Oh, let's see, it's in the shade. Here we go. Oh, the shade is from my hand. Okay. There we go. I might just have to put the, you know what? Let's use the macro lens. I think this is going to be a lot easier to see. Oh yeah, take a look at that. This is called a pink sundew. A pink sundew. Carnivorous plants are found in areas that receive a lot of sunlight, that are wet, and that the soil doesn't have much nutrients. And that is very much the case for not just the scrub, but for many parts of Florida. So what you're looking at here are what looks like dewdrops. That's why it's called a sundew. Those are actually basically glue, and that is how this plant kills. I'm going to switch back here. It's how this plant kills its prey. There I am. It's how this plant kills its prey. And we're going to pop up a video here so you can see what this looks like. But we'll turn this. Oh, I think there's no sound on this. So I'm going to talk over it a little bit. So check. This is pretty amazing. These are some time-lapse photos or videos. So this is sped up a little bit. It can take about 15 minutes for one of these plants to kill an insect. And then it can take, a couple weeks or more for it to digest that insect. I actually do see a little dark spot on here, and I wonder if that was part of an old insect that I ate. Check that out. Those hairs with the glue on them actually come in and grab a hold of that insect, and then these are different kinds of sundews. I don't think any of these are the pink sundew, but you can see how sundews work. Oh gosh, I love it. So many questions. Oh my gosh, so many scientific questions when you see something like this. How does it all work? And it's not blooming time for these, but they do need to be pollinated by insects. So they grow a stalk with a little tiny flower at the top. They need to eat insects so they can get those extra nutrients that aren't in the soil, but they can't kill all of them because they need to be pollinated.
researchers have looked at this. How do they balance that and not kill all the pollinators? Well, they've looked at sundews from all over the world, and they've seen different things. Each species is different. Some of them have different odors, so that the flower smells different than the part that's dangerous. And the pollinators like the smell of the flower, but they're actually turned away by the smell of the dangerous parts. But the insects that they like to eat will be attracted by the dangerous parts. It's pretty amazing. These do get a long stalk on them, so one idea is that maybe that helps keep the pollinators from getting stuck and getting injured, or I mean getting eaten. But there's a lot of mystery about it. There's a lot we don't know. The other little story that I like, I'll tell you real quick here, is years ago, I guess 1965 or something, one of the researchers, Thomas Eisner, had one of these, or maybe it was multiple ones. He brought it back to his lab, and he noticed that something was eating it. So then he stayed up and watched, and there was a caterpillar that lived in the sand just below it, and it would come out at night and eat this. And it didn't get stuck by the glue on the hairs. It would eat the glue, it would eat the hairs, it would eat the plant. Pretty amazing. So there's life finds a way out in nature. If a plant has a defense or is dangerous in some way, well, that might just be a niche that another species can take advantage of. Okay, well, we are going to move on to the question and answer part. If you need to take off, I don't know what your schedule is like. Thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll see you next week. But if you can stick around for another 15 minutes, then that would be great, because we've got Kevin here. So we're going to pop up. We've got a picture. You can see what he looks like when he's in his fire gear. There we go. And Kevin, are you with us?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I hear ya.
All right, good.
Back here. So I saw we had a lot of chat, a lot of people writing in the chat there. Looks like there's some questions in the Q&A. Take a look here. Here's one for you, Kevin.
Okay.
About the weather station, is the water weighed as a way to get volume? Is that easier to measure electronically than direct volume measurement?
So no, the reason for that gauge is for another measurement of how much rain we get per year. So instead of measuring it with a rain gauge and measuring the inches, it's actually weighing the weight of the water and using that to calculate how much rainfall we've gotten. And that is supposed to be more precise than just measuring it basically with a dipstick.
Okay, nice. There was another question about how many insects does one sundew eat a year? I have no idea. I have no idea. But I did read an interesting research project that was looking at pollution and how that can affect sundews. And it showed that, remember sundews and carnivorous plants in general grow in areas that don't have a lot of nitrogen or nutrients in the soil, and that's why they're eating insects to get those nutrients. So what happens when there's air pollution or extra nitrogen ends up in the soil? This study, I forget where it was. It wasn't in the U.S. It was looking at air pollution, and it had put nitrogen into the soil, and it showed that the sundews ate less insects because they didn't need them. They were getting the nutrients that they needed because there was pollution. And that might seem like, oh, that's interesting. Is that bad? Is that good? I don't know. But the researchers did make a point to say that it could be bad because the other plants around it are also using that nitrogen and growing really fast. It's like miracle grow. And sundews do not compete well. They need a lot of sunshine, nice and open. So if other plants are growing up around them, then they're not going to compete. They're not going to survive. It's one of the reasons fire is important for them. out here in Florida, because yeah, fire can kill a sundew, but it also keeps the nice open conditions, the real sunny conditions that they need. All right, any other questions? Margaret, did you see any other ones pop up?
Yes, there are a few questions in the chat. Someone asked, Kevin, how do you collect the rain?
So we're not actually collecting and keeping the rain, but the rain will fall in that gauge that Dustin showed in the video, and we collect the depth of the rain. So we put that dipstick down into the container, and we pull it out, and the dipstick is numbered, and so you can see on the dipsticks where it's wet, and you can tell that it's 1 inch, it's 2 inches, it's 1.5 inches. And so that's the data we're collecting. We're not actually doing anything with the rain. So once we've measured that and we know how much it rained, then we just dump that water on the ground, and then we're ready for the next day if we get rain again.
Awesome. And I also saw the question, how come Earth stars are loose in the sand? Did it start out attached to an underground part? Dustin, this would be probably for you.
I've got a train about to go by, so I can't hear. So maybe you could ask that question to Kevin. I got to mute myself.
Okay, no, that's totally fine. Let's see if no, you're fine. Let's see if I have any questions for you, Kevin. I've always think it's interesting when you talk about this, just because you are our big fire guy here. Is there any kind of fun controlled burn versus weather, like maybe types of weather you have to look out for when you're deciding when to do a prescribed burn, anything like that?
Oh yeah, that's a very important part of prescribed burning, is knowing what weather conditions you need to be able to burn under. You can have conditions that are too extreme. Like, for instance, if we go through a drought and we haven't had rain in 2 or 3 weeks, then it can get really too dry to do a burn, safely. Or if the humidity is really important, if it's really dry, if the air is really dry, then that's going to make the fires burn hotter and become more extreme. And then the temperature, even if it's a hotter day, the fire will actually burn a little bit hotter as well. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the daily, what's happening, during the day for the burn, and then we're looking long term at trends in rainfall, basically.
And okay, now there are a few more fire questions. Okay. Do you know how many trees get struck by lightning each year here?
No. I mean, we know that they get struck, and you go out in the summertime and you drive around and you'll see one of those spiral scars that goes down the tree where lightning hit it. And sometimes occasionally you'll even drive by and you'll see where a patch has burned out underneath a tree from a little fire that started from the lightning. But often in Florida, when we get lightning, we're also getting rain. And so what happens, probably more often than we think, a little fire will start at the base of that tree from the lightning, and then the rain will come through and put it out. And we see that quite a bit, but I can't tell you how many times it happens, but it's every year it's easy to go out and find a tree that's been hit by lightning.
And how do you keep the fire under control?
Oh boy, that's a big question. Well, you have to start with a trained crew. So we've got 6, 8, 10 people on the burn, and then we've got equipment that we use, fire trucks to maintain the boundary, and we'll wet down the edges sometimes, and then the way we light the fire really dictates how we control the fire. We'll start on one side, we'll burn in against the wind. And then once we've got an area that's black, then we can go, an area that's burned out, then we can go and we can light some strips and light some other areas of the unit and allow them to burn into the area that was recently burned, and control the fire that way. But it takes a lot of people. We have radios that we can talk to each other, and so we can coordinate what we're doing. And we have fire gear that keeps us safe. But it's a big process, takes a lot of training. But good question.
Awesome. And then there are a few questions for Dustin. The one I mentioned earlier, was about the Earth star and basically how come it was loose in the sand and did it start out attached to something underground?
Oh, that's great. That's a great question. They start off attached to the body of the mushroom or fungus called what is it called, the mycelia, which is why a fungus scientist is called a mycologist. They start off connected to it, but that's one of the interesting things about Earth stars is that they do become detached. And that's why one of the reasons I said it reminded me of a tumbleweed too, is because they do become detached. And I know one of the ways it happens is because sometimes they just lift so high up when it's wet and they open up, they can actually lift the center of the part goes up and they can become disconnected from that. I'm not sure if they also just naturally after a while become disconnected if it dries out or something versus connected. I'm not sure. So they're super cool. The best time to find ones, like nice fresh ones, is after the rain. So this is not a great time for Earth stars this time of year, but we always have a few of those we keep in the Learning Center to show students. But if you were out here during the rainy season, after rain, you go out and you find a nice fresh one. Flicking it is very satisfying. watching the spores go up into the air. Don't want to breathe them in though.
You also have the question, how do the leaves that have hair grow the hair?
I don't have a good answer there. They grew it just like they grew everything else. I think that for me, the thing to remember when you're looking at plants or fungus is that they're alive. A lot of times when we think of living things, we're thinking of animals, and we can grow new hair. All the cells in our body are alive and regenerating. We can heal wounds. The different parts of the body are sending signals to each other, communicating. Plants do all of that. They do all of those same things. They don't have a brain, but they're alive. They're healing from wounds. They're growing new tissues. So plants are pretty amazing. And just like with people, plants have certain parts of their body, and they can only do so much. It's not going to be able to grow wings or something, but it can grow little hairs on there. I don't know, Kevin, do you have a better answer for that one?
No, that was good.
Kevin, there is another question for you. The Riley family saw a video of someone setting a prescribed burn using a fire spraying ATV. Do you ever drive something like that yourself?
No, we don't have one of those. Well, all of our equipment is still handheld. It's something that we don't feel like it's necessary for the type of burns that we do, so we've never invested in one of those. I've been on several burns where other people have used them, and I can see their effectiveness in certain situations, but it's never been something that we've done at Archbold.
And Kevin, what about other methods like from an airplane or a helicopter or a drone, anything like that?
Yeah, Archbold's really kind of small. I mean, even though we're 9,000 acres, but that's still small compared to a lot of big natural areas. And so the need for like a helicopter to doing a burn is really not necessary when you're only burning, 200 or 300 acres at a time. But when you're burning like they do in the Everglades, where they might burn several thousand acres in a day, then having a helicopter to drop ping pong balls that start fires makes a lot of sense. Now, someday in the future, we may look at things like drones to help start a fire. I can see how that could be useful, but that's still really new technology, and I'm just happy to let some other people try that out and perfect it before we look into it. So.
Cool. And Dustin, one last question for you. What genus are the wasp laying eggs on the oaks?
Oh, they're called syniptid. Hey, Riley family, thank you. They're syniptid wasps. I don't know if that's the genus though, or if that's a higher level in the taxonomy. But yeah, the syniptid wasps, and there's thousands of them. There's tons of them around the world. I'm not sure how many North America has, but like I said, here just at Archbold, we have found about 80 of them. And maybe there's more that we haven't found yet here, but about 80 we have at Archbold.
Okay, I believe that is all the questions we have, and we're kind of running close to our time, so it's good timing.
Okay. Well, hasta pronto, amigos. I hope to see you next week. We'll be doing this again, and I got to figure out what we're going to talk about next. Oh, we want to try to talk about drones, but we got to figure out if we can get the technology to work to do a live feed. So there's a drone above me. We'll see if we can figure it out. For those of you who signed up on Zoom, we will send you an email with the link to the weather video that we just played. And I will also send you a guide, Archbold's Guide to Galls. So for those watching on Facebook, yes, we do live stream this on Facebook, but to get the full experience, sign up at our website for these on Zoom. That helps us too, because we send out surveys. We answer questions that didn't get answered. If we ran out of time, we send those in the email. And the surveys really help us to understand who is the audience and what are you noticing? What's your favorite things? What ideas do you have? So I would invite you all to sign up on Zoom. With that, thank you, Kevin, for coming on. Thank you all for sharing part of the morning. It's a beautiful Florida morning. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.